warned of a growing threat of diseases such as malaria and cholera. This less than 2 weeks after Cyclone Idai hit Southern Africa countries. The government in Mozambique has set up prevention and treatment centers to deal with cholera in the districts affected. As floodwaters recede, people are in urgent need of food, shelter and medicine. Displaced residents have been accommodated in temporary shelters at the Samora Machel School. Cyclone Idai lashed Beira with winds of up to 170 km per hour, then moved inland to Zimbabwe and Malawi, flattening buildings and killing at least 656 people across the three countries. Meanwhile, humanitarian group Gift of the Givers had sent rescue teams to assist with relief efforts. We speak now to one of the team members who returned to South Africa on Saturday, Dr. Qasim Bhorat, who was in Beira, and he joins me now live via Skype. Dr. Bhorat, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on SA Today. Let's just go back to the time when the team was dispatched almost immediately after the tragedy. Please share with us your experiences really from the moment you landed.
Yes, I think, obviously, you've painted the picture of how devastating the Cyclone Idai was. When we landed on Monday night, which was a late at night, unknown circumstances ready to receive us. The areas that were affected were only accessible by helicopter, which meant that we were reliant on the SANDF and the Oryx helicopter to take us. And that only happened on Wednesday. So a lot of preparation and assessments done on Tuesday, meeting with the United Nations and the other role players that were involved in coordinating the response. And on Wednesday is when I had my first medical taste, when I ended up at one of the displacement camps at Guara, where I had to triage 44 individuals to decide which of them could be medically evacuated.
But in terms of the search and the rescue mission, we understand that there are many pockets of flooded areas with people still stuck on the roofs and the trees, for example. Just share with us the situation, really. We also understand that families are displaced and officials are also still trying to reunite kids with their parents.
Yes, 100%, Palestine. The area affected we're talking about is about 3,000 square kilometers. So you can imagine the vastness of the damage and the pockets. Families have been disrupted. People don't know where each other are, whether they're still alive, whether they've been swept away with the flood waters. Our team was based in Beira in the airport, and we had to fly into those pockets of dry land to deliver food and aid and medical care. We also have a team in a place further south near Vilanculos, about 80 kilometers from there, where our team has rescued over 2,000 people just by using boats. So it's a multi-pronged approach. It's a very complex approach. It's very traumatic and difficult as a doctor to make decisions on who gets care and who has to wait the next day to get care. So I think, families, I met an individual who had severe infection of his leg. I wanted to evacuate him because that's how bad he could lose his limb or his life. And he said to me, no, he can't leave this camp because he's adopted 4 kids that he found during the floods, and they've been together hanging on in the trees for the last 3 to 4 days. He can't leave them. He doesn't know where their parents are. He never knew them before. And now he's not going to leave them. So we had to respect his wishes and treat him at that facility. And thankfully, he's doing well.
That shows, Dr. Bhorat, that the situation is still as bad as it was a few days ago. But in terms of some aid distribution, we know that the South African government has sent the South African National Defence Force members there. There were also some NGOs, including your own Gift of the Givers. How are things looking on that front?
I think the aid it was a very slow response. I think in terms of the aid, we mobilized relatively quickly, but the resources that were limiting us was helicopters. So I think if you were there, even if you had aid to distribute without helicopters to access those in need, the roads are inaccessible. There's boats because of the strong flood streams. There's no way you could have reached them. So that was the bottleneck in terms of getting aid out to those pockets. In Beira itself, the distribution began very early. We're now distributing shelter, tents, blankets, food and water. And you mentioned the communicable diseases. That's the second wave of this tragedy that's going to unfortunately hit. The first cases of cholera have been confirmed, and that's purely because of lack of access to clean drinking water as well as clean food. So I think, that's going to be the second wave. There's still a risk of additional flooding. There are dams that are now overflowing, and the dam walls have to be open for risk of other structural collapse. So there's still a risk of flooding. The rain is ongoing. But the second wave of this tragedy is definitely going to be cholera, malaria with all the pockets of water. It's a breeding ground for mosquitoes. It's an endemic area for malaria in any event. So that's just going to peak. So I think those are going to be the real challenges affecting our teams on the ground now.
That was my next question, really, because as you say, there are now fears of cholera and some cases of diarrhea. But just how bad could the situation be, more so with the limited supplies that the NGOs that are there have?
I think it's going to be a disaster. Apart from the death toll, which I think is usually underreported at the moment because those are confirmed deaths, there's people are still missing and bodies are still going to be found, unfortunately. In terms of the diarrhea, we started seeing it on day 3, day 4. We saw young children. Remember, the population in Mozambique, they don't have the best of food quality. So a lot of them are malnourished. There is a high prevalence of HIV and TB. So you've got a population already susceptible to these type of diseases. So we already started seeing it. I mean, one of the children we evacuated was a 3-month-old baby who had such severe diarrhea that the digestive juices that were being excreted actually started digesting around the anus. So that's called excoriation. So I think, we're going to be seeing tons of it: IV fluids, antibiotics, clean drinking water, hand sanitizers, and trying to ensure that this is limited to as few people as we can. But I think given the infrastructure damage, the lack of resources, this is something we're going to have to deal with on a coordinated scale with the ministry, the local ministry, with our SNDF, with Give to the Givers, other NGOs. There has to be a coordinated approach to this to limit the fatalities and the disability caused by these diseases.
I mean, there is no doubt that the situation will take a while before it returns to normality. But your teams, you still have a team that's still there on the ground. Have you been in touch with them? We do know, of course, that there are problems with connection and so on. But have you been able to speak to them ever since your return to South Africa?
Yeah, so I have been in touch with teams. We've got one based at Beira Airport, which is predominantly search and rescue with myself. And then we've got a field team that's, followed the roads up from Vilankulos and has set up a camp. They've managed to provide food and shelter for over 6,000 Mozambicans. So they're working very hard. Communication is a huge challenge. The signal, the cell phone service is intermittent at best. So it is difficult. We've dispatched a second medical team comprising of orthopedic surgeon, 2 general practitioners, 2 obstetricians and gynecologists, as well as a pediatrician and a dietitian. They've left early this morning. They should be landing anytime now, and they're going to be dispatched to set up a base in the field where they can service those who haven't had any access to any medical care or treatment.
All right, Dr. Bhorat, we have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for coming through. Dr. Qasim Bhorat was part of the Gift of the Givers team who had gone to Mozambique. He returned to South Africa on Saturday and basically saying that the situation is extremely bad in Mozambique. But of course, this is a developing story that we're keeping a very close eye on.